Another planet, another chance to learn, thought Threxel as the shuttle began its final descent toward Earth. The atmosphere around him buzzed with excitement, or maybe it was fear. After all, the rumors of Earth being a death world were unsettling. Not that anyone believed it at first. A world where everything wanted you dead, it seemed exaggerated, to say the least. Prepare for landing, a metallic voice chimed overhead. Threxel's fellow students, a mix of species from across the Craven Federation, all shifted nervously in their seats. He noticed Vrikar, a towering insectoid from the barren world of Icthel 7, tightening its exoskeleton plates. Even Vrikar, whose kind thrived on extreme conditions, seemed uneasy about what awaited them. The planet came into view, a swirling mass of blue and green, with clouds spread across the surface like delicate brushstrokes. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Is this really the infamous Death World? Elia, a slender Alar from the gas giant Melvostrin, whispered next to him. Her translucent wings fluttered nervously, catching the soft light from the nearby window. Threxel shrugged. We're about to find out. As the shuttle touched down, the doors hissed open to reveal a human. He stood at the base of the ramp, dressed in simple clothes, but there was something in his stance. Relaxed, yet vigilant. His eyes scanned each alien as they descended. Welcome to Earth, the human, Instructor Bellamy, said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You're here as part of the Intergalactic Student Exchange Program. For the next cycle, Earth is your classroom, and I am your guide. The group of students stood awkwardly, some nodding cautiously. The air was warm, the sky bright with the midday sun. Everything seemed normal. Bellamy waved them forward, leading the group to an open vehicle that hovered a few feet above the ground. Hop in, he said, motioning to the craft. First stop, a local research facility where we'll introduce you to some of Earth's more interesting wildlife. The students exchanged glances. Threxel noticed that Katari, a silent but sharp-eyed reptilian from Cebros 9, had been observing Bellamy closely. What do you think? Threxel asked, curious about the reptilian's first impressions. Katari's slit-pupil eyes narrowed. There's something strange about these humans. They act too calm. The ride through the sprawling green fields of Earth was almost peaceful. Trees swayed in a gentle breeze, and the landscape was dotted with lakes and rivers. Birds chirped overhead, their songs unfamiliar but oddly soothing. This isn't what I expected, Elia said, watching a group of animals, deer, according to Bellamy, grazing peacefully in the distance. Trust me, Bellamy interjected, overhearing the comment. This is just the surface. Earth has layers, you'll see. They arrived at the research facility, a complex of gleaming metal buildings surrounded by thick forests. Bellamy led them inside, where a group of human scientists greeted them with casual waves. A holographic display in the center of the room flickered to life, showcasing a map of Earth's ecosystems. Now, Bellamy began, standing in front of the projection, we're going to start with a little introduction to Earth's biodiversity. Earth is home to billions of species, many of which are perfectly harmless. But, he paused, letting the word hang in the air like a warning. Some aren't. The room dimmed, and the hologram shifted, showing a massive creature emerging from murky waters. Its scales glistened under the light, and rows of teeth shimmered menacingly. This is a saltwater crocodile. It's been around for millions of years and has barely changed. Why? Because it's perfect at what it does, hunting. It can grow up to 6 meters and weigh nearly a ton. And despite its size, it can sprint on land faster than most of you can react. The alien students stared, wide-eyed. Elia's wings fluttered rapidly, her translucent skin turning a paler shade. Bellamy continued, unfazed by their reactions. This is just one example. Earth is filled with predators, each more specialized than the last. Some hunt with stealth, others with raw power. And they all have one thing in common. They know how to kill. Threxel felt a shiver crawl up his spine. So this was the so-called Death World. And you, Bellamy said, locking eyes with each student, are going to learn exactly what that means. Threxel had barely settled into his seat when the next hologram flickered to life. The room was darker now, and a tension seemed to grip the air as Bellamy's voice took on a more serious tone. Let's dive a little deeper into what you'll be dealing with here on Earth, he said, pacing slowly in front of the projected image. This planet has a long history of survival, and every creature here has been forged by the unrelenting pressure of this world's violent forces. It's not just about hunting, it's about enduring the environment, the predators, the diseases. Everything here is trying to kill you. The hologram zoomed in on a dense jungle canopy, showing a small, brightly colored frog sitting on a leaf. Some of the alien students seemed confused. Threxel could hear Vrikar clicking its mandibles softly, clearly unimpressed. "This," Bellamy said, pointing at the creature, "is a poison dart frog. It looks harmless, doesn't it? Cute, even. But just a tiny amount of its skin's toxins can kill a dozen of you within minutes. The indigenous humans once used these frogs to poison their arrows. Just a scratch was enough to bring down enemies far larger than themselves." There was a stunned silence among the students. Elia shifted nervously, her wings still fluttering, unable to sit still. "You're telling me that humans used that to hunt?" Katari hissed from the back, its voice sharp with disbelief. Bellamy nodded. "Humans have always had to adapt. It's one of the reasons we've survived here. We learned to use the dangers around us as tools, but it's not just the fauna. You'll also learn about the Earth's more invisible killers." The hologram shifted to show microscopic organisms, viruses, and bacteria. Earth's diseases are among the most ruthless in the galaxy. These pathogens are constantly mutating, finding new ways to infiltrate living organisms. The human immune system has been in a constant arms race with these microscopic invaders for millennia. We've developed resistance, but some of the species here, they don't get a second chance. Threxel felt a knot tightening in his stomach. The complexity and sheer hostility of the planet were starting to sink in. This wasn't just a world of predators with claws and fangs. It was a world of death on every scale, from the microscopic to the colossal. "Now," Bellamy continued, "we'll be heading out tomorrow for a hands-on excursion to a local wildlife reserve. You'll be seeing some of these creatures up close. But I warn you, Earth's predators aren't just dangerous because of their physical abilities. They're smart. They know how to hide, how to wait." The next day, they found themselves in the heart of the reserve, surrounded by thick trees and the sound of unseen animals in the distance. Bellamy led the group through a narrow trail, explaining the different habitats they were passing. "Stick together," he said, his tone flat, but with an underlying seriousness that none of the students missed. "The animals here are more dangerous when you're alone." Threxel's heart pounded as they moved deeper into the forest. The air was thick with humidity, and every sound, every rustle of leaves, made his skin crawl. Elia was hovering just above the ground, clearly trying to avoid touching anything. Suddenly, there was a sharp cry from the front of the group. Everyone froze. One of the students, a short, heavily armored Brakthorian named Jarun, had stumbled off the path, nearly stepping into what looked like an innocent pile of leaves. Bellamy was by his side in seconds. "You see this?" Bellamy said, pointing to what appeared to be a normal patch of forest floor. "This is a nest of fire ants." The students peered closer, noticing the tiny, almost invisible creatures swarming under the leaves. "Just one bite from these little guys will send you into a world of pain," Bellamy continued. "But get enough of them on you, and you're looking at an agonizing death." Zurun, visibly shaken, backed away quickly, mumbling an apology. Bellamy waved him off and motioned for the group to continue. "Keep your eyes open. On Earth, death hides in the details." As they moved further into the reserve, the group began to relax slightly, too soon as it turned out. Threxel was walking beside Katari when they heard a sudden rustling from the bushes ahead. Everyone stopped. Bellamy turned, his expression unreadable. "Stay still," he ordered quietly. Out of the underbrush, a massive creature slithered into view, a long, thick-bodied serpent with scales that gleamed in the dappled sunlight. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air, as it coiled slowly, deliberately. Bellamy barely flinched. "This is a python," he said, his voice low but calm. "It won't attack unless provoked, but if it does, it doesn't need venom. It constricts its prey, suffocating them." The students stood frozen in place. Threxel could hear Elia's wings buzzing with barely contained panic. Even Vrikar, who had earlier seemed unfazed, had shifted into a defensive posture, its mandibles twitching. The snake, seemingly uninterested in the group, began to move away, disappearing back into the undergrowth. Only when it was completely out of sight did Bellamy turn to the students. "This is what I meant when I said Earth has layers. You never see the real danger until it's right on top of you." The rest of the excursion passed without further incident, but the atmosphere had changed. The students were quieter, more cautious, their earlier curiosity replaced by a growing sense of unease. That night, as they returned to the research facility, Threxel couldn't shake the feeling that Earth was far more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. Bellamy's final words of the day echoed in his mind. You never see the real danger until it's too late. And for the first time since they'd arrived, Threxel began to wonder if they'd all made a terrible mistake coming here. The following days were a blur of lectures, field trips, and training sessions. Bellamy and his team introduced the students to Earth's terrain, its climate extremes, and the countless species that inhabited the planet. For many, the initial fascination with Earth's dangers had turned into dread. But for Threxel, there was something else, a growing sense that they hadn't seen the true depths of what made Earth a death world. It was during one of the evening debriefings when Katari, usually the quiet observer, spoke up. "Bellamy, you keep talking about the predators and the toxins, but we've seen those in other worlds too. What makes Earth so different?" Bellamy paused, considering the question for a moment. He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowing as if calculating what to say next. "You're not wrong, Katari," he began, his voice calm but intense. "Other planets have predators. Other planets have dangerous creatures, but what makes Earth unique is that the threat is everywhere. It's not just in the jungles or the oceans. It's in the air, the water, even the very ground you're standing on can turn against you in an instant. But you want to know what really sets this planet apart?" Katari's eyes gleamed, awaiting the answer. "It's humans." The room fell silent. Bellamy stood up and walked to the holographic projector. He activated it, and images of Earth's history flashed across the screen. Violent storms, volcanic eruptions, shifting tectonic plates. Humanity evolved on a planet that has constantly tried to wipe them out. Their cities have been torn apart by nature's wrath, their civilizations brought to the brink of collapse time and again. And each time, they survived. Not because they're the strongest, not because they're the fastest, but because humans have something that most species in the galaxy lack. Threxel leaned in, curious now. "What is it?" Bellamy smiled, a dark and knowing smile. "Resilience." The projector shifted to show images of human wars, ruined cities, soldiers in combat, entire landscapes scarred by conflict. Humans have fought each other for millennia. They've created weapons that can annihilate entire populations, and still, they endure. They're not just survivors of Earth's natural dangers. They've become experts in turning those dangers against each other and against anyone who threatens them. The alien students exchanged uneasy glances. Even the most hardened among them, like Vrikar, seemed troubled by the implications. "Let me put it another way," Bellamy continued, locking eyes with the group. "Humans don't just live on a death world. They thrive on it, and they've learned to make sure that anything, or anyone, who tries to dominate them is met with the full force of that world's cruelty." Later that night, Threxel found himself lying awake in the dormitory, unable to shake Bellamy's words from his mind. The humans weren't just the product of their environment, they were its greatest weapon. Across the room, Katari was sitting up, staring out the window into the dark night. "What do you make of all this?" Threxel asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Katari didn't turn, but his voice carried a sharp edge. "I think Bellamy is trying to teach us something important, without actually saying it outright." Threxel frowned. "What do you mean?" "The humans, Bellamy in particular, they're not showing us everything. We've seen the animals, the toxins, the diseases, but I get the feeling that the real danger isn't the wildlife. It's them. They've mastered this planet. They've mastered survival in ways we can't even begin to understand." Threxel sat up, the knot in his stomach tightening. "You think they're hiding something?" Katari finally turned to face him, his reptilian eyes glinting in the low light. "I think Bellamy wants us to figure that out for ourselves. He's showing us the surface of what Earth is, but the humans, they are the deepest part of this world's danger." The next day, the group was scheduled for an expedition to one of Earth's more desolate regions, an area known for its harsh climate and unpredictable natural disasters. As the hovercraft sped toward their destination, Threxel couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. The air was thick with tension, and even Bellamy, usually so composed, seemed more focused than usual. "This place is known as the Badlands," Bellamy explained as they neared their landing point. "It's one of Earth's more volatile regions, frequent storms, earthquakes, landslides. You'll need to stay alert out here." The students disembarked, stepping onto the cracked, barren soil. The sky overhead was dark with storm clouds, and the wind howled through the rocky terrain. The ground beneath them felt unstable, as if the entire landscape could shift at any moment. Bellamy led them to the edge of a steep ravine, where the ground suddenly dropped off into a deep, jagged canyon. "This is where we'll be testing your adaptability. Earth is unpredictable. You have to learn to expect the unexpected." As he spoke, the ground trembled slightly beneath their feet. A low rumble echoed through the canyon. Bellamy didn't flinch, but several of the students stumbled back, eyes wide with fear. "Earthquakes are common here," Bellamy said, his voice steady. "You'll need to learn to keep your balance, to adapt quickly to the changing environment." Another tremor, stronger this time, shook the ground. The students scattered, trying to find stable footing. Bellamy remained calm, standing firm as the earth shifted around him. Threxel struggled to stay upright, his heart pounding in his chest. The ground felt alive beneath him, as if the planet itself was trying to throw them off. Suddenly, there was a sharp crack from the edge of the ravine. A large section of the cliffside gave way, crumbling into the canyon below. The students gasped, some backing away in panic. "Stay calm." Bellamy's voice cut through the chaos. "This is what I've been talking about. Earth is constantly testing you. You have to learn to move with it, not against it." Threxel watched in awe as Bellamy navigated the unstable ground with ease, his movements smooth and precise. It was as if he had an innate understanding of the planet's rhythms, a skill born from a lifetime of surviving its dangers. "Remember this," Bellamy said, turning to face the group. "On Earth, the environment is always shifting. It's your ability to adapt that will determine whether you survive." Threxel caught Katari's gaze, and they both understood what Bellamy had been hinting at all along. It wasn't just the wildlife or the elements that made Earth a death world. It was the humans, masters of survival, shaped by the very dangers that should have destroyed them. Days had passed since the expedition to the Badlands, but the tension between the alien students and Bellamy lingered like a heavy storm cloud. Threxel and Tari kept to themselves, occasionally exchanging theories about what Earth truly hid beneath its volatile surface, but they hadn't dared confront Bellamy about it directly. None of the students had. That was until Vrikar snapped. The massive, armored alien had been growing increasingly agitated since their arrival. His species, the Gordoth, were known for their brute strength and resilience, but Earth was wearing him down. He wasn't used to feeling powerless, and Bellamy's calm demeanor seemed to mock him at every turn. On one particularly cold and stormy night, after yet another grueling field session, Vrikar finally lost his patience. "Enough!" Vrikar's voice boomed through the makeshift camp, startling the others. He towered over Bellamy, his eyes burning with frustration. "You humans think you're so special because you've survived this chaos you call a planet, but I don't see it. I don't see what makes you so different from any other species that has faced hardship." Bellamy didn't flinch. He met Vrikar's gaze with a calm, steady stare, his expression unreadable. "You want to see what makes us different?" Bellamy's voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried enough weight to silence the camp. "Then let me show you." Without warning, Bellamy pulled a small device from his belt, a simple metal cylinder no larger than his hand. He pressed a button, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. A sharp click echoed through the air, followed by a deafening roar from the nearby canyon. The students gasped as a massive creature, unlike anything they had ever seen, rose from the depths of the ravine. It was a hybrid of reptilian and insectoid features, its massive, clawed limbs tearing at the cliffside as it climbed upward. Its eyes, glowing an eerie yellow, locked onto the group with a predatory intensity. "What is that?" Threxel shouted, his voice shaking with fear. "One of Earth's many apex predators," Bellamy replied, his tone casual. "We call it a Scythefang." The creature lunged forward, its jaws snapping shut with a sickening crunch. Vrikar stumbled back, momentarily stunned by the sheer size and ferocity of the beast. "You want to know why Earth is called a Deathworld?" Bellamy continued, never taking his eyes off the creature. "This is why. The predators here are relentless. They don't stop, they don't tire, and if you don't learn to fight back, you die." Without another word, Bellamy moved, faster than any of the students could have anticipated. In one swift motion, he drew a blade from his side, its edge gleaming in the moonlight. The Scythefang lunged again, but Bellamy was ready. He dodged to the side, his movements precise and calculated, and with a powerful strike, he plunged the blade into the creature's neck. The Scythefang let out a deafening screech as it thrashed wildly, but Bellamy held firm, his blade cutting deeper into its flesh. Finally, with one last sickening crunch, the creature collapsed, its body twitching as it bled out on the rocky ground. The students stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. Even Vrikar, who had been so sure of his own superiority, was speechless. Bellamy wiped the blood from his blade and sheathed it, turning to face the group. His eyes, cold and unyielding, met each of theirs in turn. "This is what it means to survive on Earth. You don't just endure the dangers, you conquer them. You learn to make fear your weapon, you become the hunter, or you die as prey." Vrikar, still breathing heavily from the encounter, took a hesitant step forward. "You planned this," he growled, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and awe. "You set this up to show us, what? That humans are fearless killers?" Bellamy shook his head. "No, to show you that fear is a tool. We don't just fight monsters on Earth, Vrikar. We become what we need to survive." Later that night, the students gathered around the campfire, their minds still racing from the events of the day. Threxel sat quietly, staring into the flames, replaying Bellamy's words over and over in his head. "Fear is a tool," Katari muttered, as if testing the phrase on his tongue. "He's right, you know? That's the difference. Humans don't just face danger, they manipulate it. They use it to their advantage." Threxel nodded slowly, his thoughts swirling with a mix of admiration and dread. "It's more than that, though. They don't just use fear, they embody it. Bellamy, the way he moved, the way he killed that thing, it was like he wasn't even human for a moment. He was something else." Katari's eyes narrowed as he considered Threxel's words. "That's what makes Earth a death world, isn't it? It's not just the planet or the creatures. It's the humans. They've adapted to this world in ways we can't even comprehend." Across the fire, Vrikar sat in silence, his massive form hunched over as he stared at the ground. The arrogance and bravado that had defined him since the beginning of the expedition were gone, replaced by a quiet, unsettling realization. "They're not like us," Vrikar finally spoke, his voice low. "They've been shaped by this world in ways we can't even begin to understand. We thought we were strong, resilient, but here we're nothing." Threxel glanced at Bellamy, who sat at the edge of the camp, sharpening his blade in silence. The human's eyes were focused, intense, as if he were preparing for something even worse than what they had just faced. "Do you think there's more to this?" Threxel whispered to Katari. "I mean, Bellamy, the Scythefang. It all feels like a test, like he's pushing us towards something." Katari frowned. "I don't know, but whatever it is, I don't think we're ready for it." As the night wore on, the wind howled through the canyon, and the fire began to die down. The students retreated to their tents, exhausted from the day's events, but Threxel couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of Bellamy's teachings, the Scythefang, and the unsettling truth that had begun to creep into his consciousness. Earth wasn't just a death world because of its predators or its unstable environment. It was a death world because its inhabitants had learned to become the danger. And in that moment, Threxel realized something that chilled him to his core. If the humans ever turned their gaze outward, if they ever decided to bring their methods to the rest of the galaxy, there would be no stopping them. The morning after the Scythefang encounter was unnervingly calm. The alien students, still shaken from the previous night's events, moved quietly, exchanging only brief glances as they packed their gear. Bellamy, as always, was ahead of them, preparing for the day's journey as if nothing unusual had happened. But for the students, everything had changed. Vrikar was the first to break the silence as they began their hike deeper into the canyon. His voice, usually booming with confidence, was now subdued. Bellamy, if Earth is as dangerous as you say, how did your people survive? How did you not succumb to the threats that surround you? Bellamy glanced over his shoulder at Vrikar, his expression unreadable. We didn't survive, he replied quietly. We adapted. We became something more than just survivors. The group pressed forward, but the weight of Bellamy's words hung heavy in the air. Threxel, who had spent the night pondering the humans' cryptic teachings, felt a knot forming in his chest. He had come to Earth expecting to observe, to study the so-called Deathworld and its inhabitants, but what he had found was something much more unsettling. This world, this species, was not just resilient. They had become a force that defied the natural order. The humans didn't merely endure the chaos around them, they had learned to thrive in it, to mold it to their will. As the day wore on, the landscape grew more treacherous. The canyon walls closed in around them, and the jagged rocks beneath their feet made every step a calculated risk. Bellamy navigated the terrain with ease, but the students struggled, their movements growing more labored with each passing hour. We're close, Bellamy said suddenly, breaking the silence. He pointed ahead to a narrow pass, barely visible through the haze of dust and heat. Just beyond that ridge is the place you've been looking for. Threxel's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. The culmination of their journey, the truth about why Earth was feared across the galaxy. He exchanged a nervous glance with Kitari, who looked equally apprehensive. What exactly are we going to see? Kitari asked hesitantly. Bellamy didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stopped at the edge of the ridge, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reverent. You're about to see the true face of Earth's legacy. The students gathered at the ridge's edge, their breaths catching in their throats as they looked out over the vast, desolate landscape below. At first, it seemed like more of the same: cracked earth, jagged mountains, and a sky thick with ash and dust. But then they saw it. In the distance, half buried beneath the earth, were the remnants of something massive. Metallic structures jutted out from the ground like the bones of a long-dead titan. Towers, domes, and spires, twisted and blackened by time, stood in eerie silence, a monument to a forgotten era. This is what remains of the first cities, Bellamy said, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. Humanity's first attempt to conquer this world, and our first failure. Threxel felt a chill run down his spine. The scale of the destruction was unimaginable. Entire cities, once teeming with life and innovation, now reduced to ruins, swallowed by the unforgiving planet they had tried to tame. We built these cities thinking we could control Earth, Bellamy continued, his eyes never leaving the ruins. We thought we could bend the planet to our will. But Earth doesn't care about our ambitions. It's indifferent to our survival. Kitari swallowed hard. So, you failed? Is that why Earth is a death world? Bellamy shook his head. No, the death world isn't what you see out there. The death world is what came after this. When we realized we couldn't conquer Earth, we stopped trying. We let it break us. We let it teach us. The students stood in stunned silence as Bellamy's words sank in. Threxel's mind raced, trying to process the enormity of what he was hearing. The humans hadn't just survived on this planet, they had been reshaped by it, transformed into something entirely new. Bellamy turned to face the group, his eyes hard and unyielding. We're not like other species. We don't seek harmony with our environment. We adapt to it. We become it. And that's why Earth is a death world. Not because of the creatures or the dangers, but because it creates something far worse. Threxel's voice trembled as he asked the question that had been gnawing at him since the beginning of their journey. And what does it create? Bellamy's gaze locked onto Threxel's, and for a moment the alien felt as though he were staring into the abyss itself. It creates US, Bellamy said simply. It creates humans. The weight of those words hit Threxel like a physical blow. He had spent his life studying alien worlds, learning about their ecosystems and civilizations, but this was something he had never encountered before. Humans weren't just another species struggling to survive on a harsh planet. They were a product of the planet itself, hardened, forged, and made unbreakable by the very forces that sought to destroy them. As the realization washed over him, Threxel felt a deep, unsettling fear take root in his chest. He wasn't just afraid of Earth or its creatures anymore. He was afraid of the humans themselves, of what they had become and what they were capable of. Bellamy turned back to the ruins, his expression unreadable. "You came here to understand why Earth is called a Deathworld," he said softly. "Now you know. It's not because of the threats we face, it's because of what we've become in response to them." For a long time, no one spoke. The alien students stood at the edge of the ridge, staring out at the ruins of humanity's past, grappling with the truth that had been laid bare before them. This was Earth's legacy, a world that didn't just challenge those who lived on it, but shaped them, transformed them into something far more dangerous than any predator or natural disaster. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Vrikar broke the silence. "So, what now? What do we do with this knowledge?" Bellamy turned to face the group, his expression hardening once more. "That's up to you," he said. "You've seen what Earth can do. You've seen what we've become. The question is, are you ready to face that truth?" Threxel felt a lump form in his throat. He wasn't sure he was ready for the answer.